40 years ago, the greatest team in Mets history took the field. One season, one amazing journey. This is Howard Johnson's 1986 Time Machine. We are rewinding the clock and reliving the most dominant run the Mets have ever had. Exactly as it happened. 1 week at a time. No fast forwarding, no binge watching. Buckle up as we activate the Howard Johnson Time Machine. Enjoy the ride.
Back to episode 9 of Howard Johnson's 1986 Time Machine, an exclusive here on KINER'S, your multimedia home for all things New York Mets. I'm your host, Mark Rosenman, alongside Mets Hall of Famer, two-time world champion Howard Johnson. Joining us this week, for the first time, someone from the other side of the Mets-Cardinals rivalry. He's a New York native, 1988 World Series champ, and current Cardinals broadcaster Ricky Horton. Welcome, Ricky.
Oh, great to be with you guys. This is going to be fun. I know, just reminiscing about 40 years ago. How about that?
Unbelievable, man. Crazy.
We marvel at that every single week, that we cannot believe it's been 40 years. So this week, we rewind to April 14th, 1986. A week for the Mets that had a little bit of everything. First showdown with the Cardinals, a tough home opener loss, some early frustration, and then plenty of rain, and then a couple of wins that remind you of exactly who these Mets were. 9 episodes in, the Mets finally returned to Shea for the home opener against the very Cardinals team that denied them the National League East in 1985, the same team that Frank Cashin spent the entire winter building to beat. St. Louis comes in at 4-1, already up a game and a half on the Mets, so the stage is set. Ricky, you get to start your terrific 7 innings, 2 hits, 1 run, outdueling Dwight Gooden early, leaving with a 2-1 lead. But the Mets rally in the ninth. Tim Tuffle walks, Wally Backman pinch runs, steals second, Gary Carter walks, Straw delivers a game-tying hit, makes it 2-2. Hojo, you pinch hit later in that inning, but Todd Worrell gets you to pop up to Ozzie Smith, and for the second time in 3 games, the Mets head to extra innings. Howard, you come in as a pinch hitter in that 9th inning. Even though you didn't drive in that tying run, do you remember how the energy in that dugout after Wally steals, Straw's single, 47,000 erupt at Shea as Wally crosses the plate?
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I mean, New York fans, especially opening day, I mean, it's ridiculous. And of course, playing St. Louis was always circled on our calendar. And I don't know, as a player, they're great games. I mean, we we lost to them the year before. St. Louis was kind of built to win, and we knew we had to go through those guys to get there. And it was just a lot of fun. It's a great atmosphere, a little nerve-wracking at times. You know, New York opening day is a special thing, and we want to play good. And it was just a great day.
The ninth inning was really interesting because of the way Davey managed it,
Mhm.
as well as the rest of the game. Moving Tuffle from second to first, leaving Wally in at second, putting you at third. He used 18 players in that game, and much to Barry Lyons' dismay, as he told us last week, he sent Mike Aguilera to pinch hit instead of him in an April game. But that April game, it kind of felt like October.
Oh yeah.
With all that context, does an April game against a rival like the Cardinals and a manager running it like it's a postseason game take it to a different level?
Absolutely. And it was our first shot at them since the 85 end of the season. So yeah, we were trying to win. I mean, obviously you win every game, but games against the Cardinals, Whitey Herzog, their pitching staff, their defense, their everything, they had it all. So yeah, Davey was trying to send a message early, especially since he had made some comments in the paper. So it was, there's just a lot, seemed like a lot riding on the series. It's an opportunity for us to kind of plant the flag a little bit, like, hey, this is going to be our season, and facing them early was fun. And like I said, a lot of times opening day, you don't always get that quality opponent like that, and it was great for us to be able to play St. Louis right away.
So, Ricky, you're a local kid who grew up watching the Mets, and you're there starting at the home opener at Shea against a team that you actually rooted for. Did
Yeah.
that start have any added significance to you?
Oh, 100%. And in fact, I pitched a lot against the Mets during those years, 85, 84 through 87, really, and even 88 when I was with the Dodgers, I was in the playoffs against the Mets. But the Mets, here's what I would say: when I was playing in Shea Stadium, especially, that was the big leagues for me because that's
Yeah.
where I sat up in the stands and watched Nolan Ryan pitch. I watched Tom Seaver play. I actually watched. We would go to Cardinal games when I was a kid because my grandmother was a Cardinal fan, oddly. So we would watch the Cardinal Mets games all the time. So I saw Brock and Gibson and Shannon and all that era players for the Cardinals. But Shea Stadium was, where I ate the hot dog and tried to get autographs and rooted for Ron Swoboda, my favorite player. I mean, that was the big leagues for me. Now I love Busch Stadium, obviously, grew to love it, but in a unique way, Shea Stadium was different. It just tugged at my heartstrings a little bit. And I had family there, I had a lot of family that would come and friends that would come to Shea every time I'd play there. But what was also pretty amped up for me in that moment is I'm pitching against Dwight Gooden. I mean, I was a average pitcher, which I do not say lightly. I'm not saying that demeaning me, but I was a starter reliever. But I ended up pitching against the Mets a lot because I was left-handed and I had Strawberry
Left-handed.
a lot. Yeah, and Mookie Wilson was a guy I pitched to a lot, and Dykstra and Backman. All those guys were kind of the lefties that I would, and Keith Hernandez, of course. So Whitey loved to use me against the Mets, and that starting that day was really a rush for me.
So you mentioned you're going against Dwight. You pitched 7 outstanding innings, giving up just 2 hits, 1 run, facing a Mets lineup that's known for its firepower, plus a team that Frank Cashin built specifically over that offseason to compete against all the quality left-hand pitchers that the Cardinals had back in the day. You mentioned how many times you pitched against the Mets. You ended up for your career 2-2 with a 3.41 ERA, 55 strikeouts, 3 saves, and 39 games against the Mets in your career. Looking back, what stands out to you about the way you needed to approach that lineup?
Yeah. Well, my favorite guy to pitch to in that lineup, actually, my favorite guy to pitch to in the minor leagues was Darryl Strawberry because Strawberry couldn't hit me in the minor leagues. Now in the big leagues, different story. He got a little better, and Straw is a friend of mine, and I just really obviously admired his career. But my favorite guy to pitch to was Keith Hernandez. Not that I had success against Hernandez, but Hernandez, I like to say, no offense to Hojo and others, but he was the smartest guy. I mean,
No doubt. No
I could
doubt.
see him thinking at the plate, Hojo. I mean, he'd step out, he'd look at me, and I'd step off and I'd look at him. And it'd be one of those deals where he thinks I'm going to come in while I'm going to go away. And I feel like he's thinking, well, I know he thinks I'm thinking, he thinks that I think. I mean, it was just that kind of moment.
Yeah.
You had to really work to be a step ahead of Keith. And to me, that's the ultimate battle when you've got a guy that is such a thinker and a competitor. And I had my moments, good moments against him, and my bad ones. But it was my favorite my favorite matchup was getting a chance to pitch to Keith.
So, Hojo, I guess we got to get to this. It's the first time in 9 weeks that we got to talk about something that didn't go right for you.
Yeah.
In the 13th inning, bases loaded, tie game,
Yep.
and a ball gets under your glove. In all the years I've been doing this, I'm always amazed at the recall that players have of specific at bats, big hits. But
Big
I've
errors.
never, I've never asked, do they remember a certain era?
Oh,
Do you remember that particular error in that game?
I do. And I think Tito Landrum was hitting.
Ah,
And he was a guy that would pull the ball a lot to third.
yeah.
And I just remember freezing my butt off out there. And he hit the ball. It got by me. Uh, Clear air. Might have went through my legs. I'm not sure. But I was playing in. And he hit the ball pretty good. And it just caught me in between and got by me. But yeah, we remember errors just as much as hits almost or big homers. It's just part of the game. And, they're the things that keep you up at night. You think about that. The worst thing was it was opening day. So, and it was extra innings. So everybody was there and watching. And it wasn't the way I drew it up. But I do remember that, Mark, very clearly.
You also took ownership of it in the post game.
Yeah.
Basically, your
Mm.
quote was, "I just messed up," and you mentioned that you looked up toward home plate before
Yep.
getting the ball. Were you already thinking to cut the run down, or were you also caught in between because it was only one out at the time? Were you thinking maybe double play, and maybe that's why you took your eye off the ball for a second?
Well, I think the situation was, I don't know if there was a bit double play in order or not, but the ball was hit and I knew the play was going to be at the plate. So I looked up a little bit. I mean, that's what happens. You try to get your feet underneath you and get ready. Uh, I forgot who was on third base, but it just caught me in between, and I totally blew it. You remember these things because it was opening day, and it wasn't a fun opening day for me, but I do remember the play, and it was unfortunate, but fortunately, we had another shot on the next day, and I was going to try to make up for it.
So we've talked about the Mets leadership, over the last 8 weeks, and specifically Gary and Keith. When something like that happens in the clubhouse, do they come over to you, or do they just,
Oh yeah.
they know that you knew?
Mm.
So what do they say to you on a day like that?
Hey, just keep your head up. It happens. Everybody happens to the best, and I appreciate those comments from those guys because they are the leaders, and and they have your back in that situation. It's always good. It's easier to turn the page. A little harder for your, personally to turn the page. You just can't wait to get back out there. But yeah, when you make a mistake, something goes wrong, you strike out, just do something that costs your team the game. Nobody has to remind you of it, and they just want to take away a little bit of the sting. It helps you, especially when you got to stand in front of the media and talk about it. So it's unfortunate that it happens, but it's a team game, and I had a chance to get Worrell, that first time, didn't get him, and so I had other shots later on, and those were the ones I remember the most. But um, yeah, it's always good when your teammates come pick you up and try to give you a little encouragement, and it helps. It goes a long way.
So Ricky, from your side, you guys grind out that 6-2 win. It's a 2-2 game deep into extras. This is a different era. You guys did have, meetings, and you talked about how you approach certain, batters, but it's not like today where some teams are even calling the pitches for
Right.
catches in games. What stood out to you, over a 13 inning game? That Cardinal staff that day held that Met lineup to just four singles.
Yeah.
What what was the approach?
Well, the way we would kind of prepare for a series, let me start off with that. I mean, with all the stuff that's going on today, with all the numbers, all the analytics, et cetera, my favorite conversation that I would have would be with Ken Daly, who was a left-hander in our bullpen. Now, he and I threw differently. He ended up pitching in this game before Worrell did. And Ken, it was my roommate, a very good friend, along with Van Slyke, Worrell. All those guys are buddies of mine still, and still all live in St. Louis, and we're still very, very close friends. But I would sit down with Ken before every series, and the conversation would be something like this: what is Hernandez doing with your breaking ball away? And is he looking? Is he cheating in? And what about Strawberry? How does he react? How about a changeup? Can you throw it? Now Ken didn't have a changeup. I did. I threw him to lefties. I didn't care. But we would talk about the right-handed guys too. Like, what's the pitch you want to get Gary Carter out with? And we would have those conversations. That was my preparation. I mean, I didn't really kind of care what Joaquin Andujar was doing or Todd Worrell was doing because I didn't throw anything like them. But I cared about getting my point of view from another lefty. So Ken and I helped each other out a lot. And here was so Whitey Herzog. This talk about preparation. Whitey Herzog's idea of prepping for baseball was for you to go fishing somewhere during the day and take a nap and come to the
Wow.
game and play and go home. I mean, he was not he did not like. I don't remember Whitey ever talking about baseball to me, guys. I mean, he would talk about fishing. He'd talk about my family. He wanted his approach was a relaxed player is a better player, and he also wanted the players to be professional. So if you didn't do things the right way, he really wouldn't waste time trying to train you. He'd just get rid of you. I mean,
Get
that's
rid of you.
kind of what happened. And he would be very decisive about that. So if he liked you, he liked you. If he didn't, he didn't. And he expected you, he always said, I don't have any rules, just play hard and show up and do and work hard and be on time and all. I mean, so but he had other rules, kind of, but most of those rules came through Bob Forsch had some of the veteran guys like you talked about, Hojo. Bob Force was our guy
Yep.
that
Yep. Yep.
that would get us ready and teach us, how to be a big leaguer essentially. And so I think that day, I mean, you don't have to get amped up to play the New York Mets at home on a home opener because
No.
those years, 85, especially 85, 86, 87. My dear friend Clint Hurdle was on the wrong team all three of those years. I mean, he was on the Mets in 85 and 87, and he was with us in 86. Actually got a hit in that game off a dock, as I recall. And so,
We did.
those moments were just they were electric, and we had obviously some skirmishes during those years with the Mets. We had some fights and disagreements and all that stuff, but that came out of great respect for two teams that were really good, and that's how I think great rivalries happen. Not I don't think the fans dictate that. I think the players on the field do, and so I mean it was just intense competition, and if you couldn't get up for that game, then you shouldn't be in the big leagues.
And I'll tell you what, the guy in our team was Keith. I mean, Keith
Yeah,
would get up for you guys
yeah.
like no other team.
Oh boy.
It
I
was
would
it was
imagine he would. So
infectious.
I actually played with Keith. I mean, actually, I was in a spring training with Keith before he was traded over to the Mets for Neil Allen and Rick Owenby. And
Yeah.
so I was around him enough to really appreciate him too. And he was again a great thinker and a great competitor and all that, and very very well thought of. But I know that being traded from the Cardinals was not the easiest thing for him at the time. I think he's all good with that now. But at the time, you think you're going to be a Cardinal forever or a Met forever,
Yeah.
but it just doesn't always work out that way.
Right.
It's fitting that you actually are the first opposition player to appear on this series because in the KINER'S Corner book I did like 12 years ago, you are the only opposition player to appear in that book, but you actually didn't appear on KINER'S Corner.
Right.
And I know from interviewing you for that book, you left that game winning 2-1.
I did.
And I believe you were approached to possibly be on KINER'S Corner at that point. Could you pick up the story from there and why to this day that still bothers you?
Well, and let me give you a little more backstory about KINER'S Corner because I ended up doing pre and post for the Cardinals for years. I did it for 25 years on Cardinals TV, and my love for pre and post and doing some games on TV and radio and all that started as a kid watching KINER'S Corner every single night. I remember Tommy Agee and Cleon Jones and Bud Harrelson and that era of Mets on KINER'S Corner. I learned from Tom Seaver on KINER'S Corner that he strengthened his forearms by tying a weight to a dowel and rolling it up
Yes.
and then rolling it back. I was sitting and watching that as a kid. I did that. I did that for many years. I mean, I don't know if it helped me have a better slider. I don't know, but I'm telling you, I loved watching that show. So I always said it's my goal. I want to get on KINER'S Corner. So I'm pitching against Dwight Gooden. I pitch well. So here's what happened. Here's what actually happened, Mark, that day. Mike Shannon found me, came into the clubhouse, and Mike Shannon said, "I want you to do our radio interview with me." So he takes me out of the clubhouse when Tony Carullo is looking for me to invite me to be on KINER'S Corner, and he couldn't find me because I was talking to Shannon. So,
Ah,
and I know, I mean, I wasn't, you're a young player, so you always hear the stuff that like the good stuff that you get for being on in one show or another. And a new KINER'S Corner would be jackpot, man. If I could be on KINER'S Corner, but more important than that, it would be a lifelong dream for me. So I find out after the fact that they couldn't find me because I was doing an interview with Mike Shannon on radio for a
wow.
$10 gift certificate at a local jeweler. So,
You
but
missed
it
out on
was
the wristwatch.
oh my God, I missed the watch, man. But here's something beyond that, which maybe you know about, Mark, maybe you don't. But I told Tim McCarver that story once, a couple of years later, maybe, and Tim thought that was a good story, so he came down on the field and had me intro KINER'S Corner, an episode, the show. Yeah, I taped it, and I'm in my Cardinal uniform at Busch Stadium. I welcomed everybody. I said, "You're going to watch the Mets post game show. I've been watching this ever since I was a kid. It's terrific. KINER'S Corner comes up next, something like that." As a player, and that was incredibly meaningful that Tim asked me to do that. Number one, but
Wow.
I'm telling you, and again, every time I would do post game shows on the Cardinals TV, I would think about that lifelong dream as a kid watching Ralph Kiner do those shows.
Yeah,
That's cool.
for us that grew up in New York, it meant everything. I know at one of the
Sure did.
at one of the bat dinners, they actually had Ralph there, and they had the KINER'S Corner backdrop, and I'm sitting there with Ralph, and to this day, it's like one of my favorite pictures. Like
Wow,
it's almost like I was on KINER'S Corner. So,
So I never
man.
actually got to meet Ralph until Whitey Herzog went into the Hall of Fame. And that's the only time been to the Hall of Fame ceremony. My wife and I went to see that, and Whitey got us tickets to go to that when he got inducted into the Hall of Fame. And during one of the moments there, Ralph was there with his wife, and they were having dinner somewhere in the Hall of Fame place. And I kind of forced myself to go up and introduce myself to him, and so I literally met him in the Hall of Fame, which is
Wow.
a pretty cool memory for me too.
so at one point this season, you're gonna have to have IKF on a post game show. This way,
Yeah,
you'll carry it forward.
I would exactly. Well, that's what we've got to do. Exactly right.
So, Hojo, what gets lost in that 6-2 loss is Gooden gives another 8 strong innings. Offense obviously just can't cash in. You guys had chances late, first and third, a couple of times, less than 2 outs, couldn't get that sac fly. How frustrating is it when Dwight gives you guys a performance like that and you guys can't cash it in? And plus the fact you described the team at that point in that same post game as listless early that
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. We were. Anytime Doc's pitches, we got to win that game.
Hmm.
That's just the bottom line. And when you don't, it stings a little more because not the fact that we're going to us our number two guy or three guy, but the fact that Doc's out there and the energy he provides, and we're not getting it done. And you know, Cardinals always did a great job of kind of keeping our offense under wraps. Ricky would change speeds, Tudor would change speeds. They stopped our running game, whatever we had, and it was just a different way they went about it. And we knew the bullpen with Daly, we knew their bullpen with the Worrell and all that, and so they just presented a problem for us that we needed to be solved. We couldn't figure it out, and offensively, they were special. It's a formula that I wish more teams would do now. Get these young guys, get these guys that can run, play defense, and just pitch, and you'll find yourself in most of the games. And so when we played St. Louis, that's the kind of game we anticipated. And when Doc holds them down, when he keeps them to 1 run, or 2 runs, I mean that's a game that you got to win, and we didn't get it done. So it's frustrating when that happens, but like I said, it's just when Doc was out there, it's just there's too much at stake when we don't get a W.
And Ricky, you kind of alluded to this a little earlier. You're going up against White, arguably probably at that point the best pitcher in the game at that point, facing a Mets team that's built differently than your Cardinals club. When you're in a tight game like that, are you trying to match Dwight pitch for pitch, or do you just try to keep it close, knowing that the Whitey ball style can manufacture a run with the speed and maybe steal a win against him?
Yeah, so I had so much respect for Dwight Gooden, and when you talk about the way he pitched and the way I pitched, so drastically different. If I'm thinking about matching him in any way or trying to be like him, I'm in trouble because I'm overthrowing and I'm not changing speeds, as Hojo said. In fact, I go back to the year before. The first time I ever saw Dwight Gooden pitch was in a B game at Huggins
Mm.
Stengel Field. I don't know if you were there,
Oh yeah,
Hojo. Okay, so it was a 10 o'clock in the morning deal,
yeah.
and the first time I ever saw him throw, I thought, "Holy crap, this guy!
Who is this guy?
How can somebody throw that hard and have such a good curveball?" And we're still waking up. It's 10 in the morning, and it's like I also remember that day because Strawberry hit a home run over the trees at that ballpark, which went into a
The
lake about
mile.
about
Yeah.
480 feet over center field. He hit it off of Bob Force. So I do. Yes, we remember moments, but I remember the first time I saw him pitch, and I thought that's the best pitcher I've ever seen, and I still believe that. So going up against him, I had to really divorce myself from thinking about him. And I mean, it was hard enough. I mean, I had to think about him when I was batting, but trying to bat or trying to bunt or whatever I was doing. But I had to just think about, how do I get Mookie Wilson out, and how do I get Tim Tuffle out, and how do I get, you know, anybody, Gary Carter out. So that's kind of my I think you get in trouble when you try to match the other guy, frankly.
Yeah.
And so, but it's still there are moments, and I think maybe like what I would always try to do. I always felt as a starter, I had this mental approach. I had, I just have to. I want to beat I want to beat the other guy in a 3 inning game. That's how I would do it. And I said the only way to beat him in a 3 inning game is I have to get this first inning. I got to get a zero up on the board, and the way I get a zero up on the board is I got to get the first hitter out. So I would kind of work backwards into that mentality, and then the 3 inning game would be over. And for a moment, I would think, okay, I tied him in this game, or I beat him in that game. Okay, that's over. Celebrate it for like 5 seconds, and then say, okay, I got another 3 inning game. And that's how I did it as a starter. I don't know if that's anybody
That's
does
good.
that or if that makes sense, but that's how it worked for me, just to not get, I mean, I had to have some feeling about what was going on, but I didn't want to stay with it. I wanted to go to what's next. And again, that's how I did it with, I'm sure I did it that day, and just go as long and as hard until Whitey comes out and says, that's enough.
That's the way that Dan Petrie used to pitch with Detroit.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he would say that. He goes, if we're not scoring, they can't score. It was just
Right.
just like an inning at a time.
Right.
And that would, if we're only getting one run, they can't have any more than that.
Yeah. I mean, I can't do anything when I'm on the mound to get us runs. I mean, all you can do is just say, okay, my job is to just keep this going for as long as I can go, and whatever happens, happens. So, I mean, do you care about wins? Yeah. I mean, I think we cared more about wins back then than they do now. Now they're caring about velocity and all that stuff, spin rate. But we getting wins was what it was about, but you can't make that happen. You just have to do what you do and hope at the end of the day. And again, I didn't get the win that day because you guys came back, but I felt pretty good about it afterwards. I can tell you that. I mean, I was pretty amped up that whole night.
Hojo, from an infielder's perspective, when you're dealing with Coleman, McGee, and Ozzie, how much pressure does that speed game put on you as an infielder?
Well, it puts a lot of pressure on you because they're gonna bunt. They're gonna do these different things to try to get on base and put pressure. Carter was a good defender behind the plate. He wasn't the greatest throwing guys out, and
Right.
The Cardinals seemed to have Gary's number when it came to that. It was more about just keeping him off the base pass, because once you put him on, just a ball in the gap, is going to be a run, and it's going to probably might be a triple. So you got a lot of things working against you when those guys are hitting. Lots of ways to beat you. They can beat you when they're up to bat, and so you just don't want to give them anything. If they get on, it's going to be, oh man, here we go. It's just a round and round it goes, and it's just, you don't want to let that happen. They can snowball so fast. You take your eye off of it. Things happen. You make an error defensively, things happen. It's a triple. And so you don't ever want to give those guys that opportunity to do that. That's what they want to do. Just like, we were not built on speed, the Mets, but we had enough speed, but we had guys that could hit for power. And so our style was a direct contrast to the St. Louis Cardinals style.
Right. Yeah.
And so it really showed up every time we played them. And so it was a lot of pressure, and that's the kind of game plan that they wanted to run.
So it's interesting, Mark and Hojo, when we would play teams, and I'm thinking about the Mets and the Dodgers kind of differently, but in the same context of being able to make a team really get a little antsy about our running game, and it happened. It happened with. I mean, I love Gary Carter, and obviously we miss him, and it's such a great Hall of Famer. I mean, and a Hall of Fame person too. My personal reaction to Gary Carter is every time I would come to the plate, he'd say, "How you doing? How's your wife? How's your kids? What are you?" It's like, hey, I'm trying to hit here. I mean, it's trying to hit Dwight Gooden, and you're talking to me. I mean, stop talking to me, Gary. But I mean, such a likable guy. But what you said, we've talked about that Gary would he would try to be so quick from glove to hand that he would drop the ball 90% of the time. And he wasn't doing it on purpose. Yeah, and he'd call the fastball, but he would also go like that and drop the ball, and there'd be no throw, because and clearly the running game got in his head. The Dodgers, we got in their head with their pitchers, because their pitchers are trying to do so much. I mean, think about that era. That was
Oh yeah.
Valenzuela and Hershiser and Jerry Royce. I mean, they were all Bob Welch. I mean, all really good pitchers, but they would just throw fastballs right down central to try to keep guys from stealing, and then our guys would
Yeah.
start raking and
Yep.
they would try to quick pitch and they'd lose velocity. I mean, all that stuff, and we got in their heads for sure. So the running game, I still think that works if you've got the right
It does
personnel to
work.
do it.
It
Yeah.
does work. Absolutely.
And a byproduct of the Cardinal style of baseball was maybe one of the key acquisitions that Frank Cashen made. He needed a lefty to keep you guys tight at first base and Bob Ojeda. So,
Yeah.
that was one of the keys to how the Mets try to control your running game. So, there's obviously opening day at Shea every year, especially with a team that's built for, hoping to win a pennant, huge expectations. But there's always Met fans is always that little tension in the air, waiting for that the shoe to
Yeah.
drop. You get George Forster getting booed on opening day. You get
Mm.
Keith getting that huge standing ovation because of everything that went on in the offseason with, waiting to see if he was going to be suspended and the Met fans showing their love. Do you guys feel all that? When you speak to athletes, they always talk about that, they're zoned in and they block out the crowd and they don't really hear it. Opening day, is that different? Do you guys feel that energy?
I do. I sensed it, especially for Keith, because everything with St. Louis and it happened to him, all the drug stuff, and he's coming over, he's the leader of our team basically. And it was a big, big series. I mean, he hated St. Louis. We used to
Hmm.
go there to play. He hated it.
Yep.
We fly from East Coast to the West Coast and back, and we had to stop in St. Louis for fuel. And he used to call it Hooterville. So he hated stopping in Hooterville, man. He couldn't stand it. So it was always something for him.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
funny.
and I would agree. You get amped up for that, and the word, I don't think it's the wrong word when you hear a player talk about there's electricity, there's something, there's a buzz that
Yeah.
you feel, and if I was fortunate enough to be in the playoffs and in the World Series in 85, 87, and 88, as you mentioned, 3 years, and those moments, there's just something. I
Ah,
mean, it's buzzing everywhere. But I feel like opening days like that in St. Louis, but opening days certainly like that in New York. But I think when the Cardinals and Mets played anytime during those 3 years, there were buzzes because there was always something to play for. There
yeah.
was always a thing that either we were in first or you were in first. So it's like you're either catching us and just moments, and then those close games, those close moments create tension about a particular rivalry, a guy that hits you or a guy that that you actually gave up a big hit to. I mean, there's always this kind of tension, and back then, and as I mentioned, I played with Tom Lawless. Told you guys played with Tom Lawless in golf today. He was our leading bench jockey on our team. I mean, he's yelling at the other team the entire time, and they don't do that anymore. But that was artwork, I think, for us. So,
Oh,
Joe, I mean, it was just part of the deal. It wasn't personal. It wasn't, but
no,
it's just part
just
of the
fun. But
fun, and it was competitive, and it just kind of made that electricity even more.
yeah, Clint Hurdle was our bench jockey. He was the number
Oh
one
yeah,
guy. He
yeah.
would lead the charge, man, every single night. It was
He had that. He
unbelievable.
has a deep voice too, so you could
Oh,
hear him. And Lawless was just witty and funny and all that stuff. I got to tell you one more thing about that opening day thing that just popped into my head is that another New Yorker on our team is Andy Van Slyke, who I think felt the same way about
yes.
playing in New York. I grew up about 90 miles north of New York City, and he grew up further north than that. But we were roommates that year, as I recall.
Wow.
We were, because he got traded the next year to the Pirates, but we were roommates, and that day I had planned on going to visit my family. I rented a car, and I was going to, after that game. I mean, longer than I thought. So, but because I pitched so well, I agreed with somebody in the clubhouse that I would be on an open line radio show back in St. Louis. So this is no cell phones, no, we weren't in that era yet, or even ways to communicate. But it's like, okay, it went later than I thought. I thought I could do it from my parents' home and call them, but the game was later. So Andy decided to come home with me. So I took Andy back to my house to stay at my house in Hyde Park, where I grew up. And we're driving along, and I realized I'm not going to make this. So we pulled into a fire station somewhere in Westchester County. Literally pulled into a firehouse, and I said, "This is a weird question, but can I use a phone because I have to do a radio interview?" And they let me do that. So we sat around and talked with at a firehouse with several guys, and Andy was kind of doing his entertaining of them while I did my little radio show, and then we drove back to New York. And it also happened to be April 14th was my late mother's birthday also. So there's just a lot of things, a lot of ties, a lot of important things that connect you on a personal level with our game.
You know, this also triggered something because you both guys mentioned Clint Hurdle and Lawless as bench jockeys, and it's an art that's no longer in the game. But over and above that, you know, the WBC, obviously it's a little different, but when you have one of the Mets' bitter rival, Philadelphia Philly, Bryce Harper, singing the praises of Nolan McLean and saying how he's probably one of the best, going to be one of the best pitchers, and he's so tough to hit against. I just could never fathom Keith Hernandez ever saying something nice about John Tudor. What's changed? Hojo, you want to take that first, and then Ricky, I got to get
Yeah.
your point on this.
Yeah.
Well, probably because anything you say now is going to be blasted all over the media, some fashion, on radio, TV, newspaper, whatever. So I think guys are just hesitant to go out there and say something that is derogatory. It's just a
Yeah.
different game now, too, especially. I mean, back then we'd have no fraternizing. You couldn't talk to guys in their team. I mean, you get fined by the league. I used to see the letters that they would send somebody for. They'd meet out in center field, shake hands or whatever, look at talk for a minute, and you'd get a letter. It was like $100 or something like that.
Right.
It's just
That's
it
right.
was just very much discouraged, and so now it's completely flipped on its head. It's like a welcoming party every time you play somebody, and yeah, it's just different. Nowadays you almost have to say something good about people. And from Bryson's standpoint, he's probably thinking he doesn't want to say anything that would make Nolan McLean more pissed off. So
Right.
or give him more, adrenaline to try to get him out, or make better pitches against him, whatever. So there's just a lot of, nowadays it's just a lot of fluff.
I feel the same way about that, and our kind of poster guy for that kind of attitude. You mentioned Keith, and he was before my time, but I had a very good relationship with Bob Gibson, and Bob Gibson was the classic guy. And not only wouldn't he talk to Keith Hernandez, he wouldn't talk to anybody else in another team's uniform at all. In fact, there's
Yeah.
the story that his former roommate Bill White got traded, and Bill White was crowding the plate, so he threw at Bill White and broke his arm.
Oh my gosh.
And it's like
awesome.
hey Rumi, what'd you do that for? He said, well, you were crowding the plate. I mean, I'd hit my mother if she was, I mean, so
Yeah.
that was that Gibby's
Yeah.
idea of competing was that. And so I feel like our era was maybe not quite as dramatic as what Gibby was, but I think he still had a sense of look. Our line was, as you recall, we used to say, hey, take him to dinner. I mean, if
Yeah,
you're
take him
talking
to
to a
dinner.
guy, take him
Dinner
to
and a
dinner.
movie.
Yeah, go see him after the game. It's fine. So I was involved in. We had a fight with in the Cardinal clubhouse at the year I was not there, where Todd Worrell went over the spread, knocked all the food off to take a punch at Pedro Guerrero because he was visiting with Sammy Sosa in the Cardinals clubhouse after a game, and
I
Todd
remember
was saying
that. I do remember that.
he
I heard
doesn't
about
belong
it.
it. Yeah, and I had an argument with Ozzie Guillen with the White Sox the same way. Of look, this is not. Now I will say this. Having played winter ball, I assume you played winter ball at some
Yes.
point, Hojo. I do look back and realize that when I went to winter ball, I was happy to be speaking English to somebody, obviously. So you end up connecting with guys because you just need
Yeah.
your connection. And so if guys from the Dominican want to talk in center field, I just feel like I gave that a pass because I feel like they're just they're from the same country and they have the same culture and they just a little more lonely, and it's okay. But I think for us to fraternize, you could talk with guys at the batting cage, but just briefly and then move on.
Yeah. Don't mess with that.
Right.
It's great that you brought up Bob Gibson because Bob Gibson also does have a Met Cardinal tie. A lot of people don't even know this, that when Rube Walker was a pitching coach and Joe Torre was the manager, Bob Gibson actually had the title of attitude coach for the New York Mets. He was not a pitching coach, but he was an attitude coach, and basically,
Perfect.
It's a euphemism for tough guy. Yeah,
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So we get all this excitement. Great day for the Cardinals opening day, excitement of, obviously opening day, but then you get back-to-back rainouts, and that series just stalls. Both
Mhm.
teams don't play another game until Friday, 5 days in between games, 3 days in between games. Um, the Cardinals go on, on to Montreal. You guys continue, playing, but a few weeks ago, Timmy Tuffle told us that it was important for hitters to get their timing, to get consistent
Mhm.
bats early on because their eyes had to adjust to the speed. You mentioned that you hated the All-Star break. Even those 3 days
Yep.
off would mess up your rhythm early. When the rain comes in April and throws that schedule off kilter and pitching off of kilter, how much does that mess up the rhythm early in the season for you, Hojo?
It's big. I mean, in some ways, I didn't mind it that much because I hated the cold weather and I didn't want to have to play in it if I didn't have to. Um, I was kind of soft that way. I just didn't like it. I just didn't like playing in the cold. And so we had rainouts. A lot of times we'd be at the field early, obviously, and then you're just waiting for that window to open up. And you knew that even playing was going to be, kind of muddy out there, a little sloshy, and it just wasn't fun. But just the waiting around and waiting around, and if the team was, if the game was going to get called, call it early. That was kind of our feeling was just get out of here. We'll come back the next day, play two if we have to, whatever. But yeah, rain delays, same thing. At least at the field, you can go down there, take a few swings, kind of kill the time that way if you weren't playing cards and just kind of keep the blood flowing. But it was not fun. Days off were good, but when you have rainouts, it's just a long day at the field for nothing.
And facilities were different then than they are now too. So you
Yeah,
might have a couple of cages, So to keep guys sharp during periods of not playing early was more of a challenge. I don't recall like if we, if you had a early rain, I don't even know if we would even come to the ballpark. I don't even know if the
yeah,
Cardinals would have even done that. It'd be like, well, a couple guys can come and swing, but you really can't. Where are you going to play catch? I mean, it's just kind of impossible. And I 100% agree about the All Star break. I hated the All Star break because I was a field pitcher. Baseball
yes,
is way more of an art than I think 99% of baseball fans feel or understand. It's feel, hitting, pitching's feel, and once you kind of get off that feel and you try to get it back, it's not just brute force anymore. It's not strength. Strength matters, yes. Arm speed, bat speed, yes, but feel is still critical. And if you don't play catch for 3 days and come back, it'd be like, oh my goodness,
Mm,
I've never done this in my life. I don't even know where the ball's going. So I never liked pitching the first day back after the All Star break.
And pitchers are known to be creatures of habit as
Oh
well.
yeah.
And you take a look at the current Mets team. Kodai Senga is a perfect example. Needs his whole routine in between starts. For you, Ricky, when that whole rotation is thrown out of kilter early on, which is tougher, the mental aspect of it or the physical aspect?
So I kind of it's a weird answer to say this, but I took I don't want to say pride. I worked very hard to not let either the physical or the mental be difficult for me because I knew that if I was going to survive in the game of baseball, I had to be a starter slash reliever. And I pitched a game that year in 1986. I threw 8 innings as a reliever in a game. Okay.
Wow.
So I mean, I had to be ready to do just that. And then I had to convince myself the next day to come back and be ready to pitch. Now they didn't use me, but I had to think that way because I knew that no one liked doing that because of the mental and the physical deal. So I would do everything physical I could do to convince myself that I could pitch today. Okay, like say after I pitched 3 innings in the bullpen, and and that made me better for the next day and better for the next day. That was my physical part, but mentally that was also part of it. Is I never wanted to use it as an excuse. I would hear guys say, like I just said, I didn't like pitching after the All Star break. I wouldn't say that publicly then. I
yeah,
didn't.
yeah.
I would never say that because I would not want to admit that I can't overcome that because I needed to overcome that because I didn't throw like Todd Morrell and like Danny Cox and all. I mean, Joaquin Andujar, all those guys. I mean, I needed to be unique in a way, and my uniqueness was being able to pitch whenever, wherever, however. Whitey called me his doctor He said, occasionally he said, call me Dr. Horton. He said, I just, when I need something, I'll just call my doctor and he'll get a start and then he'll go in. And so I closed games at some time, throwing 84 miles an hour, for goodness sakes. And if you're not mentally thinking, I can figure out a way to do this, you're never going to do that. So it is, I don't, it's hard for me to answer which is harder, Mark, because of that. Because I just try to not entertain either the mental or the physical challenges of doing it.
Yeah.
So Cardinals leave town. They head to Montreal. The Mets get the Phillies coming in, and this is where things start to feel a little more of what '86 was going to be for the Mets. The Mets take that first game 3-2 behind Dwight, tight, clean, just enough offense. Does a win like that after those days off kind of give you guys a reset, Hojo?
Absolutely, it does. You just, once you lose, you want to get back out there and play another game. Let's just play another game. We're going to win the second game, the next game. And so, yeah, Phillies coming in, that was a good rivalry as well. Like I told you earlier, episodes, they weren't as good as us. Wasn't like St. Louis coming in. And that we felt like that was a team that we could handle. So, yeah, and when Doc on the mound, you get a win. So you did what you're supposed to do, and that was good for us mentally to get back out there, get our record back even, and just kind of get the season started. The first week of any season is kind of a show. I mean, there's so much that goes into it, but really, it's just 4, 5, 6 games. That's it. In the scope of a season, it's not that many, but we put so much emphasis mentally, right, on being ready for that opening day, opening week. And you just want that to kind of get going. We can kind of settle into a routine and start playing regular baseball.
And you said after that reset, the next game is more of what we would come to notice of
Yes.
the New York Mets. You guys explode. You win 8-0. Danny Heap, that's another thing where like all these guys start contributing. He
Yes.
goes deep in that game. When you guys get into the clubhouse after that 8-0 win, is that when you guys can finally exhale and say, all right, you finally put together that type of game? Because all the other games were, you blew some leads, you came back,
Yeah.
it wasn't clean. This was finally what, everyone was expecting.
Yeah. Early on, things happen, it gets magnified. You just, teams are up for you. They're ready for, the beginning of the year, opening day and all that. So it's just, things can happen, but once you settle into the regular season and things are just going along normally, then your talent kind of takes over. Do you have the best team? It's going to show. And so that's kind of what we felt like we were starting to get into is, okay, let's settle in, got a rotation under control. Guys are getting at bats, things are happening, guys are getting hits, and you start to settle in, and it's just a lot easier to play once you're going. And the opposite is true once you get into the postseason. Kind of reverts back to the opening day mentality where you're just so focused on that one game, and it's good, but it could also be a hindrance. If you put too much emphasis on it, you got to kind of keep your mind at a little bit of a distance from that. You can't let yourself get overly worked up for one single game.
Right. That's true.
So, Ricky, the Cards take the first two against Montreal. You get the start Sunday, which is now 6 days since that start against the Mets. You deliver what is known today as another quality start. You go 7 2/3, giving up 2 runs. Your ERA at this point is sitting at 1.84. And your record,
I
though,
should have
is
stopped right there, Mark. I should have quit.
but your record at that point is now 0-1 as
Yeah.
Jay Tibbs goes the distance, shuts out the
Yeah.
Cardinals. When you start off a season pitching pretty much lights out in 2 games and have a losing record to show for does it weigh on you for that next start?
I don't. I didn't. I would say it didn't. I mean, do you want to win? Yes, but I think there's some point where we all understand that there's results, and then there's did you have a good game? Did you have a good at bat? Did you throw good pitches? Did you pitch well? That's different than what the numbers might even say about that. And you maybe even
True.
gave up a blue pit and the runs or whatever. But I mean, so I would say at that point, I'm still feeling like, because I've had some experience with that. When I was in Double A, I started out 0-6, and I had an ERA under 2 when I was with the
Wow.
Cardinals. And that was in that Billy Beane was the center fielder for the Mets that year, and Strawberry was in right, and I try to think of all the other players they had at the time. Tim Bogart was on that team. I mean, there were all these kind of future big league players on that team, but in that league. But that year I was 0-6. But and my manager kept saying, like, just keep doing what you're doing. I mean, they're not scoring any runs. Well, you can't fix that. Just keep doing what you're doing. So I feel like just being able to have success. In fact, that year I was more locked in '86 than any year that I pitched, and I actually credit the fact that my arm hurt so badly that year. I mean, it felt like every pitch hurt, and so I had to find the slot that actually worked. And if I threw the pitch incorrectly, it hurt even more. So I feel like there was something about the beginning of my elbow problems that
Mm.
actually dated to '86. But I did feel mentally locked in, and I think having success early on, um, and with a team that I thought was going to be competitive, we ended up not being. We had a very kind of average year, obviously for compared to what the Mets did. But it was. I would say I was still feeling pretty good at that moment.
So after that home opening day loss to the Cardinals and the rainouts, the Mets win 3 in a row. The Cardinals go 2-1. Ricky, I know it's April, okay?
Right.
And the year before, you were the team being chased. I have to assume the mindset was that you guys felt you were going to be the team being chased. But early on in the season, if the Mets were the team that you felt was going to be the team that you guys needed to beat, do you guys look at the standing? Do you look to see what the Mets did in April at all?
I would say that we probably did not because our experience from the year before, we weren't great for several weeks early in the season in '85, and ended up now. And the '85 team, by the way, was picked to come in last place in the East Division.
Wow.
So it's weird. It's weird to tell Cardinal fans two things. Number one, we were picked to come in last place that year, but number two, that we were in the National League East. That just seems like so many years ago. You have to tell Keith that Hootersville was obviously in the East Coast at the time, but it was. I think for us, we kind of most of that same core of people were there in '86 that were there in '85. So I don't know that there was any panic buttons at the moment. Did we think that the Mets would be the team to beat? Absolutely. I mean, we knew that from the year prior, and they only got better. So and like you said, there are other teams in the league, Expos and Pirates and Phillies, but I just felt like it. I don't think that was the same at the same level of focus for us as the Mets did.
So, Hojo, looking back at that week, the Cardinals sit atop at the end of the week, the National League East at 7-2. Pirates, behind at 6-2. Mets are 5-3, game and a half back. After all the highs and lows, the close games, the blown loss, the blown leads, the extra inning drama,
Yep.
how do you think the first week set the tone for the rest of the season?
It had a positive effect on that because I remember after opening day, we had the Mets welcome home dinner in New York City, and it was a big deal that we were 2-3 to start the year, and fans were kind of getting a little antsy, believe it or not, early in the season. And it's I don't know. We made a kind of resolve at that point as a team that we were not going to let that first week define our season. And
Mm.
so once we got going, it was just okay. We're just doing our thing right now, and we're taking over. And that was kind of the mindset, and it really worked for us. There's no other way to explain it. I mean, yeah, we had a good team. We knew we were good, but I think when you have a good team and mentally as a group, you're kind of pulling in the same direction. Good things can happen, and that's kind of where we found ourselves.
Isn't it? Let me ask you. Let me ask you if I can, Mark. Let me ask
Yeah.
Hojo. So, there's something about when every season's different, and sometimes you just get something that flows and works, and you get,
Yes.
it's like a feeling, and it's like an energy. There's something that just builds, and
Yeah.
and it's personal with guys, your friendships, you're pulling for each other. You just sense something's different, and
Something's
and and
different.
clearly you guys had that in that season.
Yeah. We I think one of the places where I think it started, Ricky, to be honest with you, it's not a knock on me or anything, but when Ray Knight became the regular third baseman during that early season. Normally Davey would pinch hit me with a righty, and Ray would come out or vice versa. But Ray was having a good game, and might have been the following week. He's basically he left Davey in there against a right-hander in a situation that normally I would hit. And I
Yeah.
think at that point, the team started to play much better. Only the fact that it gave some stability, I think, a little
So,
bit to
yeah.
the lineup. When a guy's hot and you ride with that guy and he continues to be hot, I mean, what are you going to say? I mean, it just makes you better as a team. And
Mhm.
so I think that had a lot to do with why the team started to flip the switch and start to play well.
Let me say, I can tell you from the Cardinals' point of view, we didn't like you coming up, especially left-handed, uh, late in games, because everybody knew how good a fastball hitter you were, and it doesn't matter whether it's Todd Worrell, throw as hard as you can. But I mean, as
Yeah,
I recall you having several big flies against Todd, if I'm not
yeah,
mistaken. I mean,
I
yeah, and
did.
so
Yeah.
it's like we it did not go unnoticed. Let's put it that way.
Well, like I said, I told this guy earlier in podcasts, different episodes, that I don't know why, but just some reason, he was throwing where I was swinging because he was not an easy at bat by any
Yeah, right,
means,
right, right.
not at all.
So in closing, there was that 3 to 4 year period where this was one of the biggest rivalries in baseball. So from your standpoint, take me through it, Hojo, what you felt, playing the Cardinals was like.
Well, it was fun. It was a clash of style, and I always enjoyed the challenge of it because it was different. And I think it showed us, hey, there's lots of ways to win. So we don't always have to hit the long ball to win. We could get on and steal and try to create, pressure on them. Unfortunately, they had Ozzie Smith, Terry Pendleton, and Tommy Herr. They had players that could, play defense better than most teams. So we just had to be on our game, man. It elevated our game. So, when they always say competition makes you better, well,
Hmm.
when you face the best, and St. Louis was clearly the best team in the National League for reason, we had to elevate our game to match that. And so that did make us better equipped, especially as we faced them later in the season and we played games against teams that were good like that. We knew we could handle it and how to handle it. And so you have to kind of go through that fire in order, so to speak, to get better. And that's what we did. And it helped us a lot moving forward through that rest of that year.
And
Mark,
Ricky,
here's my thoughts on it. If I can interject my thoughts on that same
yep,
subject, if that's where you're leading.
yep, that's where I was
But
going.
yeah, I figured. So when I got to St. Louis, all I could hear from fans is about the great Cubs Cardinal rivalry, and I didn't know what they were talking about. Frankly, I mean, now if you go back to the '60s and '70s, the Cardinals and Cubs, there was a lot of moments. Brock and the trade that got Brock. There's a lot of reasons, and it's closer, of course, the Midwest rivalry, but that was nothing to me. I mean,
Nothing.
it was like that wasn't even a thing. Now it is now, and it's become that once the Cardinals moved to the Central Division, and he went through Dusty Baker and Tony La Russa's all their issues and some big games between the two teams then. But it was the Mets, and our fans kind of caught on to that, and you don't have to Google very much to figure out that our fans would call Mets pond scum, which I don't even know
Yeah,
what that means. I don't even know where that came from. I, but that was kind of like we're gonna go beat the pond scum, and somebody wrote that in the paper, and that became a thing. And if you ask any Cardinal fan from the '80s to define the Mets, that's what they would call them. Just
exactly.
and it wasn't again. It's not personal. It's just kind of a
Yeah,
we really like beating the Mets now. But let me say this: all these years later, we have mentioned several names on this podcast. A couple we did not mention, including Jesse Orosco, who eventually became teammates of mine. I played with Danny Heat. I played with Jesse Orosco. I've been around. Uh, I was also, of course, with Keith Hernandez with the Cardinals for a bit. Really, really connected in a lot of ways to Darryl Strawberry, and so these Met guy Clint Hurdle is a dear friend of mine, and So there were several. Rafael Santana was a teammate of mine in both the
Yeah,
Dominican and in the minor leagues and in the big leagues for a while with the Cardinals. I loved Rafi. So when it's all said and done, 40 years later, I think back and I think about people and the
yeah,
people that I got to compete against at the highest level on the planet. 24,000 people have ever played big league baseball, which, boggles the mind to think about that. That's the lower
yeah.
deck at Citi Field. It's not a lot of people. And but those people that I just mentioned, I had meaningful experiences with, meaningful moments with in the game of baseball. So that's what I mean, you remember the home runs, the strikeouts, the all that stuff, but at the end of the day, you end up having relationships with people that you care about, and that's what that rivalry means the most to me. Is the connection that I share with people.
That's true. Let me say one more thing, Mark, real quick about the rivalry. Is when you look at rivalries, I never even thought about the Cubs and Cardinals being a rivalry. Never, not
Mm-hmm.
once when I was in New York. It was always us and the Cardinals. St.
Mm-hmm.
Louis and the Mets was the matchup, was the series, right? That was the true rivalry. The Phillies wanted us to be a rival of theirs, and I guess
Yeah.
geographically we are, but we never thought the Phillies as being a rival because we were that good. The team that was in front of us was St. Louis. And so that was our only thought was we've got to beat St. Louis. We didn't care.
Mhm.
We knew we were going to beat Philadelphia, but we didn't know we were going to beat St. Louis. It always made us better to play those guys.
He couldn't have said it any better. And I think also the fact that Whitey Herzog was, we had the opportunity for him to be the manager of the Mets, and they chose Yogi Berra instead. And obviously the rest was history. I mean, Whitey was key in a lot of the acquisitions of some of the early talent of the
Gary
Mets. And
Gentry, Jerry Kuzman,
absolutely,
Tom
all
Seaver, all
Whitey.
those guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
so
then
I,
you,
I've
you
got
got Keith as
I've
well.
so I've got the name. As you kind of market this podcast, I think the name of this podcast is Hooterville versus Pond Scum. I feel like that's what
I
we should
love
call
that.
it.
I
That's
love
what this
that.
episode that's how we'll promo this episode for sure. So
I
there you
love
have
it.
it. There
Love
you
it,
have
Ricky.
it.
That's
Hooterville
good.
versus Pond Scum. A week
That's
that
it.
starts with a tough loss to Hooterville.
That's
A moment Hojo wishes he could have back. Maybe a
Oh,
little bit of doubt creeping in, and then just like that, a couple of wins, a comeback, a offensive explosion, and a reminder that this team could be what we all thought it was going to be.
mm.
Special thanks to Ricky Horton for joining us, and of course
yes.
for Hojo taking the ride once again. If you missed any of the prior episodes, you can catch them all on KINER'S We'll see you next week when the road continues. The story of 86 just keeps getting better and better right here on Howard Johnson's 1986 Time Machine.